Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. The man from the family of Levi married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and had a son. She saw there was something special about him and hid him. She hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a little basket boat made of papyrus, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed the child in it. Then she set it afloat in the reeds at the edge of the Nile. The baby's older sister found herself a vantage point a little way off and watched to see what would happen to him. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile to bathe. Her maidens strolled at the back. She saw the basket boat floating in the reeds and sent her maid to get it. She opened it and saw the child, a baby crying. Her heart went out to him. She said, "This must be one of the Hebrew babies." Then his sister was before her. "Do you want me to go and get a nursing mother from the Hebrews so she can nurse the baby for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said, "Yes, go." The girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter told her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me. I'll pay you." The woman took the child and nursed him. After the child was weaned, he presented him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I pulled him out of the water." Praise be to God.
I sang that at the funeral, at the graveside of Merle Summers, and sang it a cappella. It's an amazing hymn with amazing words, and that's why it was chosen. In cocoons, a hidden promise. There's a song in every silence, something God alone can see, talking about when God seems hidden. When God seems hidden. Many years ago, I was introduced to the writings of a man named Jacques Ellul, very eclectic, brilliant individual, whose passion crossed so many disciplines. He was a philosopher, French philosopher, law professor, sociologist, economist, and Christian theologian. How's that for starters? Wow. That's something. And Ellul, before he died, authored 58 books and thousands of articles. I read one year a handful of them. They're not easy reading, but there's so much in there. The dominant theme of Ellul's work, his premise is that the technological age that we live in has brought with it a lot of negative things. It poses a threat to human freedom, to meaning, and religious values. One of the books I read that I really liked is called Hope in Time of Abandonment. Hope in Time of Abandonment. Now, what he says in that book is that in this technological, secular, and humanistic, materialistic age, it seems that God has left us to our own devices and our own ways, that God has abandoned us for this age, to our own folly and sense of nothingness. And in spite of that, though, it's a book about hope. Because he said hope is the only answer to God's silence. Hope is why God is silent. So we will hold on to hope, nothing else. He said hope only comes alive in dreary silence, the dreary silence of God, in loneliness before a closed heaven, in our own abandonment. Hope is the ultimate confidence, friends, in God. It rejects God's silence. It demands that God speak up. It demands that He keep His promises and reveal Himself in a new way. In spite of that, it's the contrary. What do you think? Do we live in an age of abandonment? Has God left the building? You know. Have you ever felt abandoned by God? Have you ever gone through a dark night of the soul when it seemed that there was a closed cabin and your prayers bounced off the ceiling? I have. If you haven't felt abandoned by God, and perhaps like Philip Yancey, you've asked the questions, is God silent? Or is God hidden from us? Does it seem in times that He doesn't care? He may be disinterested in us in times of trouble and doubt. You know, the oldest book of the Bible is the book of Job. And Job says, "Why do you hide your face from me and consider me your enemy?" It's pretty honest, right? Isaiah said, "Truly you are a God who hides Himself, O God of Israel, the Savior." See, Isaiah is saying this. He says, even though God's hiding from me, I still know He's there. He's my God, the God of Israel, and our Savior. So is this really God hiding Himself in our situations when darkness takes over? Or is God revealing Himself in ways we don't always recognize or acknowledge? That's the question. Our story today talks about this. It's one of the most familiar stories from childhood. We all know a little baby wrapped in a basket, right? Hidden in the bulrushes on the Nile shore. Now, I want to say this, I want to back up a bit, because this story, doesn't stand alone, just as Tessie read it this morning. We have to connect it to what happened in chapter 1. But I want to say this. Between the closing of Genesis and the first chapter of the book of Exodus, there has been a great shake-up and change for the descendants of Jacob in Egypt. You might remember in Genesis the story of Joseph. It's the longest story in the Old Testament about one individual. Remember how Joseph was sold into slavery by his scheming and jealous brothers? And how through a seemingly series of circumstantial events, he eventually rises in power to become Pharaoh's right-hand man. Because he had a dream of an impending drought coming. And he was elevated to this position to store food, to plan it all out so that it could be rationed out in the time of drought. And he saved the nation from starvation because of that. Also his own family benefited. Remember, the brothers came down to get food for their family, their aging father they left behind, and how he recognized his treacherous brothers, they didn't recognize him, and how he eventually was reconciled them, forgave them, embraced them, brought his father down, his younger brothers, and they lived there. They lived there on the best of land that was in the whole nation of Egypt. They were treated like royalty. And they were welcomed. 400 years have passed. And what's happened in 400 years is that these Hebrew people have grown in numbers and have prospered in wealth. And various pharaohs have come and gone. But it says in the text that there came to be a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, didn't know the history, didn't know the relationship, the favor that Joseph had had. And he could only see the growing numbers of Hebrew people and their prosperity, and he saw it as a threat to his security, his position. So he introduces chaos into their lives. He enslaves them. He puts them to work on massive government building projects. He works them hard. But they continue to multiply. So he comes up with the final solution. He orders the murder of all Hebrew males at birth. He tells 2 midwives, who it says feared God, in chapter 1 of Exodus. He said for them to kill them when they were being born. But they disobeyed. And he said, the Hebrew women give birth too fast. By the time we show up, the baby's there. So the Pharaoh gave another order. He said, every boy that is born must be thrown into the river and drowned. That brings us to our reading today. But think of it, years of unanswered prayers, continued oppression, the blessings enjoyed under Joseph, the sign of God's favor, taken away and replaced with cursing. How did he feel? Well, in spite of seeming silence, this sets the stage for the birth of Moses. Mother has him keeps him for a while, hides him away until it's no longer safe, then puts him in that basket in the bulrushes, and eventually he becomes the deliverer of the Hebrew people. What a story. What a story. Now here's the thing. In the midst of all the amazing circumstances that bring Moses into the very palace of Pharaoh as the prince of Egypt, God himself is never mentioned once. Never mentioned. Kind of like the book of Esther. But God never shows up. Not mentioned. Other than that one comment I alluded to in the previous chapter, that the midwives feared God. God's presence, God's self, isn't manifested anywhere. Apparently he's absent from the action of the story. And everything else seems to operate purely by human, natural efforts. Friends, there are times in our lives, there are times in my life, sometimes great periods of time, when you feel God is absent, when you feel the silence, the hiddenness, maybe abandonment, uninvolved, uncaring, unconcerned. But I want to say this, just as in today's story, it's not so. Never. One commentator I was reading said, it's God operating in quiet mode. Now if you have a computer and you have an antivirus program, it probably operates at times in quiet mode. And that doesn't refer to its absence or its hiddenness. It means it suspends certain activities when you're performing tasks that require higher utilization of your system resources. I sound like an IT geek now. Believe me, I am not. But it continues to operate in the background. We're just not aware of it. I think the story of Moses here is that God is in quiet mode. Quiet mode. Now eventually Moses experiences God in active mode, doesn't it? It doesn't take long. The next chapter, the burning bush, the voice. Right? And then when the people are freed, after the plagues and all of those things that go on, there's the cloud and the pillar of fire to guide them. There's Mount Sinai, where he basks in the glory of God's presence. There's the provision of quail and manna. Now God shows up eventually, but not here. Not at all. Not at all. Wow. Listen, what does the story of Moses, the way God has worked in this early part of his life, teach us about God's ways of working in our lives when there is no sign of his presence, purpose, or power? When we feel alone, adrift in life's baskets, lost in the reeds. First, I want to say this. This story shows that God is working unseen plans. Unseen plans. Proverbs says this, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. Right? We have to remember this. You can make your plans, but God's purpose prevails, even when it seems obscured by things. The message is this, don't expect to always know what God is up to in your life. Don't take it by what it appears to be. These audacious midwives, think of the courage of them, the risks they took, lying to the king. They feared God, but they didn't have any inkling of what God's purpose for the future was, for any of them. They simply remained true to their calling to serve life, not death. That's it. Moses' mother, she might have woven a fine basket there, right? She might have fitted a lid, sealed it, and waterproofed it well, but in her heart, she still had to fear a disastrous outcome for her little boy. And no matter how slyly she researched the princess's bathing habits, and she coached her daughter to pay attention and observe, in her heart she must have still feared death would be the result of her traitorous behavior. In the end, she couldn't rely on her weaving skills, the strength and protection of the bulrushes, the pity and compassion of an Egyptian princess. In the end, all she could do was rely on God, on his care and his providence and his love. That God, and the God who was operating in quiet mode, went to work. See, at times, for me, the very hiddenness of God assures me that he's at work in unseen plans, behind the scenes. Behind this. I found this so often in my life, where God is seen hidden in circumstances, and other people, how I entered the ministry, how I came to be here for 34 years, the amazing things we've all done together as a congregation in this city, in partnership with others, how Wayne and I connected, 1980, and how he came to be here. Nothing more than chance, perhaps, it looked like. A series of seemingly unconnected, non-related events over time. First, Wayne held a training event in my home church in Scarborough, Ontario, and even met my parents and was in their home before we had met, while I was out west. A casual friendship in the early 80s, and then I lost contact with him. Till the end of the 80s, when he moved to the States. And then an unexpected phone call from him in 1989, inquiring about the United Church of Canada and whether there might be opportunities for him to come back and become part of it. And then at the end of that conversation, I know Wayne remembers this one, we shared what was going on in our lives. Oh, he was building a new big church, and I was so discouraged and so tired of this place that I wanted out. And then Wayne said to me, well, why don't you come down our way in January, the end of January, in Southern California, at the Schuller Institute? And I said, no way. Not doing that. Too broken. Didn't want to show my face. Didn't want to see him. But I went, and I hid from him all week. I saw him, and I went the other way. Too broken. Too ashamed. And you know my story. That's when my life and that's when ministry was transformed for this place by that experience. And I had a new sense of vision and mission, and it resulted in us seeking a ministry of outreach. Maybe that should be. But I had no way of contacting him. I'd lost the phone number. I didn't know he'd changed denominations. I was phoning the wrong denomination right on. And then one day, this is rare, I was cleaning my desk. And I was looking in a tray, and out floated a little piece of paper. And there was his phone number. Turned to, I phoned. I said I had the craziest thought. I think you're supposed to come to Central. And he went dead silent. And here we are 23 years later. Don't expect to always know what God is up to in your life, friends. Okay? This is a lesson for all of us. But we know God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God and are called according to God's purposes, right? That's true. The story is the story as our stories are of the God who's at work in unseen plans. Secondly, it's about God at work in unexpected places. Even hidden in a frill basket in the midst of the weeds by the bank of the Nile, the last place you'd look for anything meaningful. Strangely enough, it's only because Moses is in that remote, obscure location that his life is saved. Because no Egyptian princess is going to bathe out in the middle of the crocodile-infested Nile in plain view. She would select a small, quiet, safe tributary that would be carefully monitored by her entourage. And Moses' mother might have only been seeking to protect her son from the jaws of ravenous reptiles. But it was a stroke of good luck and eventual rescue. Don't always expect to know where God is working, even in the bulrushes and everyday baskets that block the vision. Often I've discovered that's precisely the places we need to be for God to reveal a plan and direction for us. You see, being in unexpected places allows God to show us that often, even when we can't discern it, there's someone placed nearby who sees better than we do the direction God is taking us. Newton Hislop has been a member since he was born of this church. And he grew up here. And I was planning for his wedding last year. And we were sitting in my office talking about what they wanted. And I somehow mentioned we were having problems with our boiler. We didn't know if it was going to survive the winter. And his eyes lit up in a moment. And he said, "I'd like to have a look at it." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because that's what I do. At the Saddle Dome, I look after all the mechanical systems. And I love this boiler. I've been down at boiler room since I was a little boy. That's why I went to SAIT, that's why I got my tickets. And I want to maintain that boiler for it." Well, we were there to talk about a wedding. And he has kept that boiler going all year long. And doing repairs and monitoring it like it's his baby. He's here so many days every week because he loves this place and he's part of it. God is at work in unexpected places. Story says there's no place out of bounds to God. There's no places where he cannot and he's not at work. Wherever we find ourselves, wherever you find yourself right now. The Bible is a chronicle of events in people's lives when they found themselves in inhospitable situations. Jacob, heartbroken, going back to face his angry brother who may kill him for having deceived him of his birthright. He's at a river and lays down and he's tired and then he's attacked by a stranger and he has to wrestle him all night. And the stranger dislocates his hip. So he walked with a limp, and the stranger was God. And he gives him a new name and a new destiny. Who would thunk that? Paul is backed up against the Aegean Sea in Troas, an older port city. All his plans to go into Asia Minor, to the big cities, to take the gospel are thwarted, and here he is, nowhere else to go until that night. He has a vision of a man calling him over to Macedonia. He says, "Come and bring us the gospel." That great crossing in the gospel news from Asia to Europe. Who would think it? Who would think it? There are no dead ends. God is at work in unexpected places. Bethlehem, an out-of-the-way dead-end place. Baby born in a basket. Raised in Nazareth, where nothing good ever came from. Dying in a garbage dump outside the holy city. Nothing good ever came from a cross. Till then. We as a congregation have frequently found ourselves in such inhospitable and challenging places, even now, and all the more reasons to expect God to be at work than ever before. Finally, the story is that God is at work in the most unlikely people. Unseen plans, unexpected places, unlikely people. God's way of remaining anonymous. The Egyptian princess was pampered and protected and privileged her whole life. Hardly the first person who comes to mind who would be interested in selflessly saving a dirty, crime, abandoned, condemned, no-count slave baby. Yet, she feels love. She does know about the death sentence imposed upon all male baby boys, Hebrews. But that knowledge alone prompts her remarkably compassionate, divine behavior. This is God's Trojan horse. She is, a way of sneaking him into the palace under the nose of Pharaoh. And ironically, Pharaoh housed him, fed him, educated him, the man who would free his slaves. Ironically, God often uses people from outside the family of faith to preserve, protect, and guide all the time. I'll close with this. Some of you read my Facebook posting last week. I came home one day from work and I opened the gate to go to the side door, and here's this beautiful little puppy sitting there. Little sandy color. I don't know where it was. I think part poodle. Looking at me with the saddest eyes in the world. A sweet dog. I could see that he was somebody's pet because he was well fed and he wasn't malnourished. But there were no tags on him. And I feared for him. I didn't know what to do. So I put him in the backyard and closed the gate so he didn't run out and get hit by a car. We gave him water and we cooked up some chicken for him. Because we called the vet nearby. And she said, give him chicken and rice that we had. So we gave him, he wolfed that down. And we thought, what are we going to do? It was a silent prayer. What are we going to do for this little animal? God, what are we going to do for this animal? We phoned the city and Humane Society, and then I thought, I'm going to contact my daughter, Melanie, because Melanie has her little Lola dog, and she loves animals, and especially small ones. So I contacted Melanie, and I told her, I said, what do you recommend? And she said, leave it with me, Dad. I'll check in. Couldn't have been half an hour later, she comes back to us and she says, I found the owner. How do you find the owner of a dog that's got no identification? You know? She said, oh, I tweeted Mayor Nenshi. Yeah, I would have thought of that. I said, what? Mayor Nenshi? He's a busy man. Oh no, Dad, he's always posting lost animals on his Twitter page. And the woman saw his tweet and said, sweet. And I got her name, I got her phone number. And we phoned, and she was rejoicing. And she was in the neighborhood. She got her little dog. She said, he's awfully cute, but he's so stupid. So we were happy. But again, it reminded me, where was God in all of that? It didn't seem obvious. Was God there? In an unseen plan, an unexpected place, an unlikely person? And you wonder about your life. What do you believe about it? What can happen to it? Can you believe it? That God is in hidden plans in your life that only God knows? Only God alone can see, as we say. In unexpected places, unlikely person.